Welcome to this extraordinary journey into the language of hands, understanding gestures and hidden meanings, written and brought to life by mindful literary. Hands, there are storytellers, are truth tellers, revealing what words often cannot. In this video, we'll explore how gestures unlock hidden emotions, foster deeper connections, and help you navigate the silent code of human interaction. Before we dive in, I'd like to invite you to subscribe, like, and share this audiobook with those who could benefit from its insights. It's not just a gesture, pun intended. It's an act of support that helps us continue creating meaningful content for you. Every click, every share, helps this channel grow and reach others who, like you, are searching for knowledge and connection. Together, we can build a community inspired by wisdom and understanding. Now, let's begin the journey of discovering what our hands are truly saying. Introduction. When hands speak louder than words. It was a meeting I'll never forget. A high-stakes negotiation, one that would determine the future of a partnership years in the making. The words exchanged were polished, deliberate, and careful. Each side presented their case with professionalism, and on the surface, everything seemed in balance. But I wasn't just listening to their words. I was watching their hands. Across the table, the CEO's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him. The way his fingers tapped the table with increasing speed, the way his thumb unconsciously rubbed against his palm. It was all there, the silent story of doubt, pressure, and discomfort. His words said yes, but his hands said, "I'm not ready to commit." By the end of that meeting, I knew the deal was falling apart. His team didn't see it, the other negotiators missed it, but I knew. That moment solidified something I had been slowly realizing. Our hands often speak louder than our words. The hands are one of the most expressive parts of the human body. They move, gesture, fidget, and flow, often without conscious thought. While our words are carefully chosen, rehearsed, and deliberate, our hands tell the truth. Think about it. You can fake a smile, control your tone, and rehearse your lines, but your hands have a way of revealing what's really happening beneath the surface. A clenched fist betrays hidden anger. Fingers nervously adjusting a ring whisper fear. An open palm exudes confidence and honesty. This silent language isn't just a supporting act, it's often the main show. Research has shown that gestures can amplify the meaning of words, contradict spoken statements, or even replace speech altogether. In fact, we rely on hand language so heavily that people who are blind from birth gesture naturally when they talk, even though they've never seen anyone do it. When you understand the language of hands, you unlock a new dimension of communication. You start seeing what others miss, hidden emotions, unspoken truths, and the gaps between what people say and what they mean. This book is not about the basics. You won't find shallow explanations like crossed arms mean defensiveness or a firm handshake means confidence. Those are oversimplifications that don't do justice to the rich, complex world of hand language. Instead, we're going deep. This is a journey into the subtle, layered, and powerful ways hands communicate. Together, we'll explore the science and psychology behind hand gestures. Why do they exist, and what makes them so revealing? Advanced techniques for interpreting gestures. How to read the subtle clues most people miss, like microgestures, cultural nuances, and subconscious signals. Practical applications in real life. How to use hand language to navigate relationships, enhance your professional presence, and build trust in personal and social settings. How to master your own gestures. Developing awareness of your hand language to align it with your intentions and strengthen your communication. This is not just a book about observation, it's about transformation. Understanding hand language doesn't just help you interpret others, it changes how you move through the world. You become more present, more aware, and more capable of connecting with others on a deeper level. By the end of this book, you'll never look at a pair of hands the same way again. You'll notice the nervous fiddling of a colleague during a tense meeting, the quiet reassurance of a friend's open palm, the defensive shielding of someone who feels vulnerable. And more importantly, you'll begin to use your hands with intention, building trust, expressing confidence, and connecting with others in ways that transcend words. So, let me invite you to begin this journey with open hands and an open mind. Pay attention to what your hands are doing right now. Are they relaxed, tense, or idle? Notice them, and in that noticing, take the first step into a world where every gesture speaks volumes. The silent language of hands is waiting to be understood. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The hands tell the truth. The hands never lie. Unlike words, which are carefully crafted and filtered through the layers of our conscious mind, hand movements are often raw, spontaneous, and deeply honest. They express emotions, intentions, and thoughts in ways that words cannot. Even when someone's face remains composed, their hands might fidget nervously. While their voice might project confidence, their fingers might tap out a rhythm of doubt. The truth lives in the hands, waiting to be seen by those who know how to look. Why are hands so honest? Because they operate on a subconscious level. While we may rehearse what we're going to say or carefully craft a smile, our hands move in response to impulses we don't always control. They're like a direct line to the inner workings of our emotions. This connection between hands and truth isn't just anecdotal, it's backed by science. Studies in nonverbal communication show that hand gestures are closely tied to brain activity, particularly in regions associated with emotions and problem solving. When we're stressed, excited, or conflicted, our hands act out those feelings before we even realize it. Think about a time you were nervous. Maybe you rubbed your hands together, picked at your nails, or repeatedly adjusted your watch. These small gestures spoke volumes about your internal state, even if you said nothing. The honesty of hands isn't limited to moments of stress. They also reveal joy, confidence, and connection. An open palm extended in greeting, fingers resting lightly on a table during a conversation, or a steady hand guiding a team. All of these gestures convey authenticity and emotion without a single word. One of the first times I truly understood the power of hands was during a business negotiation. The room was filled with executives, each one poised and professional, their faces a mask of calm neutrality. But I noticed one participant's hand resting on the table, fingers slowly drumming in a seemingly random pattern. At first, it seemed insignificant, but as the conversation progressed, his hand movements became more pronounced, clenching into a fist, then releasing, over and over. While his words were measured and agreeable, his hands revealed tension and unease. Sure enough, when the meeting ended, his actions aligned with his gestures. He backed out of the deal, citing concerns that hadn't been apparent in his verbal communication. His hands had revealed his internal conflict long before his words did. Another example comes from a courtroom observation. A defendant sat quietly as the prosecutor presented their case. His face was composed, but his hands told a different story. Clenched tightly at first, his fingers then began tapping against his thigh, a rhythmic, agitated motion. The jury might not have noticed, but those hands spoke volumes: frustration, fear, and an attempt to mask nervous energy. These are not isolated cases. I've seen countless instances where hands betrayed the truth, whether in personal relationships, professional settings, or public appearances. The hands are deeply tied to our emotional and cognitive processes. This connection explains why they reveal what words often hide. Hands bypass the filter of conscious thought. While you can rehearse what to say or how to act, your hands are more likely to respond instinctively to emotions and impulses. Gestures and emotions are neurologically linked. The brain's motor regions, which control hand movements, are closely connected to areas responsible for emotional regulation. When you feel something deeply, your hands often reflect it before your mind has a chance to censor the reaction. Gestures amplify cognitive load. When we're under stress or dealing with conflicting thoughts, the hands tend to mirror that inner turmoil through fidgeting, tapping, or other movements. This honesty isn't just about nervous habits or tension. Hands also convey sincerity and trustworthiness. Open palms, steady movements, and gestures that match verbal communication create an impression of authenticity. The reverse is also true. When someone's hands don't align with their words, like a stiff handshake paired with a warm greeting, it creates a sense of unease. We may not always consciously notice these discrepancies, but our instincts often pick up on them. What are your hands saying? Take a moment to observe your own hands the next time you're in a conversation, a meeting, or even alone with your thoughts. Notice the unconscious movements. Are you tapping, fidgeting, or clenching? What might these gestures reveal about your inner state? As you move through this book, you'll begin to see hands in a new light, not just as tools for action, but as storytellers of the body. In the next chapter, we'll explore the evolutionary roots of this silent language and why hands have been central to human communication since the beginning. For now, remember this: the hands never lie. If you learn to listen to them, they'll reveal a world of truth hidden in plain sight. Chapter 2: Evolution's Handprint. Have you ever wondered why we instinctively wave to greet someone, extend a hand in peace, or clench our fists when angry. These gestures are not arbitrary. They're the echoes of thousands of years of human evolution. Our hands have been integral to survival, connection, and communication long before the first spoken word. The story of hand gestures is the story of humanity itself. It's a tale of survival in the wild, connection within tribes, and the subtle signals that built civilizations. To truly understand the language of hands, we must first trace their origins and the evolutionary imprint they leave on us today. Imagine being an early human, living in a world without spoken language. How would you warn your group of a lurking predator? How would you signal your readiness to share food or your willingness to join forces? Before language, gestures were survival tools. A raised hand could signal a halt to the group. An outstretched arm could beckon someone closer. These gestures were crucial for coordination and safety in a dangerous world. Hands also played a role in building trust. An open hand signaled that you weren't carrying a weapon, a universal sign of peace that still exists in gestures like waving or extending a handshake. These simple, nonverbal acts fostered cooperation, ensuring survival in a harsh environment where humans relied on one another. Even today, echoes of these survival instincts persist. When you raise your hand to get someone's attention, you're reenacting a gesture that's been ingrained in human behavior for tens of thousands of years. As humans developed language, gestures didn't disappear, they evolved alongside it. In fact, many gestures that we use today are rooted in ancient practices. Greeting gestures, the handshake, believed to have originated in ancient Mesopotamia, was a way to show that neither party carried a weapon. A raised hand in greeting, like the modern wave, likely began as a way to display an empty palm. Pointing, one of the simplest and most universal gestures, pointing has been used for millennia to indicate objects, directions, or people. Even infants instinctively point before they learn to speak, showing how deeply rooted this gesture is. Thumbs up, often associated with approval, this gesture is thought to date back to Roman gladiatorial games, where a thumbs up indicated mercy or favor from the crowd. As societies became more complex, gestures adapted to meet the needs of new social structures. Religious rituals incorporated symbolic hand movements. Political leaders used grand gestures to command attention. Trades and professions developed their own hand signals to communicate efficiently. Modern communication, from courtroom debates to TED Talks, still relies heavily on gestures. The way a speaker moves their hands can amplify their words, build trust with their audience, or unintentionally reveal uncertainty. The connection between gestures and human psychology is deeply ingrained in our biology. Hand movements are not just tools for expression, they're intertwined with how we think, feel, and process the world. Number 1. Hands and the brain. The motor cortex, the area of the brain responsible for movement, is directly linked to emotional processing centers. This connection explains why our hands often move instinctively in response to strong feelings. When we're excited, our hands tend to move energetically. When we're nervous, fidgeting or self-soothing gestures like rubbing palms emerge. When we're frustrated, clenching or abrupt movements often occur. These automatic gestures are not random. They're the brain's way of translating internal states into external expressions. Number 2. The mirror neuron system. Have you ever noticed that when someone gestures excitedly, you feel a sense of their energy? This phenomenon is thanks to the mirror neuron system in our brains. Mirror neurons activate both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing it. This system allows us to intuitively understand the meaning behind gestures, fostering empathy and connection. Number 3. Gestures and cognitive processing. Gestures don't just communicate emotions, they also aid in thinking. Research shows that people often gesture when explaining complex ideas, even when speaking to someone who can't see them, like over the phone. These findings suggest that gestures are not just an accompaniment to speech. They're an integral part of how we process and express thoughts. Reflection, the timeless role of hands. The gestures we make today are not random. They're the result of an evolutionary journey that spans millennia. From survival in the wild to connecting across cultures, our hands have always been central to how we navigate the world. Take a moment to observe your own gestures or those of the people around you. Consider how these movements might carry echoes of ancient instincts, adapted to modern contexts. As we move forward in this book, we'll build on this foundation, diving deeper into the subtle ways hands reveal truth, emotion, and intent. Understanding the evolutionary roots of gestures is just the beginning of unlocking the silent language of hands. The next chapter will challenge surface-level interpretations, showing you why context, subtlety, and observation are essential for decoding this fascinating language. The hands may speak, but it's up to us to truly listen. Chapter 3: Beyond the Basics. In the world of nonverbal communication, it's easy to fall into the trap of oversimplified interpretations. After all, phrases like crossed arms mean defensiveness, or hands on hips mean dominance, are easy to remember and apply. But human behavior is rarely that straightforward. Our hands communicate with nuance, shaped by context, culture, and individual personality. To truly decode hand language, we must look beyond the obvious and embrace the complexity of gestures. This chapter takes you past the basics, exploring the subtleties that make hand language a rich and revealing form of communication. The internet is full of lists that claim to decode body language, often offering overly simplistic interpretations of gestures. While these can provide a starting point, they fail to capture the depth and complexity of hand language. Take the example of crossed arms. It's often labeled as a defensive gesture, but is that always true? A person crossing their arms might simply be cold. They might be comfortable in that position, using it as a resting posture. They might be defensive, but the reason for their defensiveness could range from feeling attacked to simply being deep in thought. The same gesture can mean entirely different things depending on the individual, the situation, and the surrounding context. Without deeper observation, these nuances are lost. When we rely on simplistic interpretations, we risk misjudging people, assuming intentions or emotions that aren't accurate, missing the bigger picture, focusing on one gesture without considering the whole body or situation, damaging relationships, reacting to misinterpreted gestures in ways that create misunderstanding. The lesson: gestures are not fixed meanings, they are dynamic, layered, and contextual. To interpret hand language effectively, you must always consider the context. A single gesture can carry multiple meanings depending on the situation, the relationship between the people involved, and cultural influences. Situational context. A person wringing their hands in a job interview likely signals nervousness or anxiety about performing well. The same gesture during a heartfelt conversation might indicate vulnerability or an attempt to self-soothe during an emotional moment. In a hospital waiting room, it could reflect deep concern or worry. Without the surrounding context, it's impossible to accurately interpret the gesture. Relational context. Hand language also depends on the dynamics of the relationship. A casual wave between friends carries a different emotional weight than a formal handshake at a business meeting. Holding hands with a loved one conveys intimacy, but a similar gesture in a professional setting could feel invasive or inappropriate. Cultural context. Cultural norms significantly influence the meaning of gestures. For example, in many Western cultures, a thumbs up is a sign of approval, but in some Middle Eastern cultures, it can be seen as offensive. A firm handshake might signal confidence in the US, while in Japan, a lighter grip is often preferred to show respect. Understanding the context in which gestures occur ensures that your interpretations are accurate and respectful. Not all gestures are grand or obvious. Some are so small and fleeting that they're easily overlooked, but these microgestures often hold the most revealing truths. What are microgestures? Microgestures are subtle, often subconscious movements of the hands or fingers that occur in response to internal thoughts or emotions. Examples include a quick twitch of the fingers, a fleeting clench of the fist, a subtle tapping of the thumb against the palm. These gestures may only last a fraction of a second, but they can provide powerful insights into what someone is feeling or thinking. Why microgestures matter? Because they are subconscious, microgestures are less likely to be controlled or filtered. This makes them incredibly honest indicators of emotion or intent. For example, a slight clenching of the hand during a friendly conversation might indicate suppressed anger or tension. A barely noticeable rubbing of the fingers during a negotiation could suggest uncertainty or hesitation. A fleeting open hand gesture while speaking might reveal genuine openness or sincerity. How to spot microgestures. Observing microgestures requires focused attention and practice. Watch the hands, even when the person isn't actively gesturing. Subtle movements often occur during pauses in speech or moments of reflection. Pay attention to transitions between larger gestures, where microgestures often slip through. Pair microgestures with other nonverbal cues, such as facial expressions or tone of voice, to form a complete picture. Understanding hand language isn't about memorizing a list of meanings. It's about observing, interpreting, and connecting. It's about looking beyond the obvious, considering the context, and noticing the subtle details that others overlook. As you move through the rest of this book, keep these principles in mind. Always ask, what else might this gesture mean in this specific situation? Don't rush to conclusions. Let the full context and accompanying cues guide your interpretation. Train your eye to notice the micro-movements, the quiet whispers of the hands. In the next chapter, we'll begin exploring how hand gestures express confidence, control, and authority. You'll learn how to spot these powerful signals in others and how to embody them yourself. For now, take a moment to notice your own gestures. What are your hands saying right now? Chapter 4: Gestures of Confidence and Control. Confidence isn't just heard in a voice or seen in a posture. It's felt in the way someone moves their hands. A leader extending open palms during a speech, a negotiator making decisive gestures to emphasize their points, or even the simple act of resting hands calmly on a table. These are all gestures that radiate authority and self-assurance. But not all displays of confidence are genuine. Some are carefully crafted facades, where gestures appear forced or overcompensate for inner doubt. This chapter dives into the hand gestures that convey confidence and control, how to distinguish authenticity from pretense, and ways to embody these gestures yourself. Hand gestures associated with confidence are rooted in openness, clarity, and purpose. They signal trust, self-assurance, and a readiness to engage. Number 1. Open palms, a gesture of trust and transparency. Open palms are among the most universally recognized gestures of confidence and trust. Historically, this gesture showed that a person wasn't holding a weapon, signaling peace and honesty. Today, it continues to communicate sincerity and openness. Open hands while speaking. Someone who uses open hands to emphasize their points comes across as approachable and authentic. Palms facing up. Often seen in speeches or debates, this gesture invites collaboration and signals a willingness to listen. Palms facing down. A subtle way to project authority, often used to assert control or close a discussion. Number 2. Decisive movements, gestures that command attention. Confidence is also conveyed through gestures that are deliberate and controlled. Pointing with purpose. A single, purposeful point can direct attention and emphasize a critical idea. Overuse, however, can come across as aggressive. Strong, defined movements. Whether underlining a point with a slicing motion or gesturing outward to expand on an idea, confident movements are always intentional, never fidgety. Number 3. Calm, restful hands, silent authority. Even when someone isn't actively gesturing, their hands can exude confidence. Calm, still hands resting lightly on a table or folded comfortably in the lap indicate self-possession and control. Not all gestures of confidence are authentic. Some people attempt to mimic confident body language to mask insecurity, but forced gestures often lack the natural ease of genuine presence. Signs of forced confidence. Exaggerated gestures. Overly wide or dramatic movements can feel unnatural and draw unnecessary attention. Fidgeting in between gestures. A confident person's hands rest calmly when not in use. Forced confidence often reveals itself in restless hand movements between gestures. Inconsistent signals. Someone who gestures confidently but avoids eye contact or shows tension in their body is likely projecting an image that doesn't match their internal state. Indicators of genuine confidence. Natural flow. Gestures arise effortlessly, aligning with speech and emotion. Congruence with other cues. A confident person's gestures match their tone of voice, facial expressions, and posture. Relaxed transitions. Between gestures, hands rest naturally rather than fidgeting or gripping objects for comfort. How to spot the difference. The key to distinguishing genuine from forced confidence lies in observing the whole picture. Forced confidence often reveals itself in subtle inconsistencies, gestures that feel out of sync with words or emotions. Genuine confidence, on the other hand, resonates with authenticity and balance. Number 1. The speaker's hands. Imagine a public speaker addressing a large audience. Their hands move with purpose, open and expansive to draw people in. As they make a key point, they pause, letting their hands rest briefly before resuming a natural flow. Their gestures reinforce their words, making them memorable and impactful. Number 2. The negotiator's signals. In a tense negotiation, a confident negotiator uses decisive gestures, pointing briefly to emphasize terms, spreading their hands outward to show openness to collaboration, and keeping their palms visible to project honesty. Their movements are measured and intentional, instilling trust in their position. Number 3. The everyday leader. A team leader in a meeting uses hand gestures sparingly but effectively. When presenting an idea, their open palms invite discussion. As they outline steps, their hands trace clear, deliberate paths in the air, guiding the team's focus. During pauses, their hands rest lightly on the table, signaling calm confidence. How to develop confident hand gestures. Number 1. Practice intentional movements. Start by becoming aware of your hand gestures during conversations. Notice when your movements feel natural and when they seem forced or fidgety. Practice using deliberate, purposeful gestures to reinforce your words. Number 2. Focus on resting states. Confidence is just as evident in stillness as in movement. When not gesturing, allow your hands to rest naturally on your lap, a table, or at your sides. Avoid crossing your arms or hiding your hands, as these gestures can signal defensiveness. Number 3. Align gestures with speech. To ensure your gestures feel authentic, let them arise naturally as you speak. Avoid overthinking or rehearsing them, as this can create a robotic or unnatural effect. Confidence in your hands. Take a moment to consider how your hands convey confidence. Ask yourself, do my gestures feel purposeful and natural? What do my hands do when I'm not actively gesturing? How can I use my hands to enhance my message and presence? In the next chapter, we'll explore how hands reveal emotions, diving into the subtle signals of joy, anxiety, anger, and more. For now, observe the gestures of confident people around you. What do their hands say about their inner state? And what might your hands say about yours? Chapter 5. Hands and Emotions. Emotions aren't just etched on our faces or heard in our voices, they pour out through our hands. The way we move, hold, or position our hands often betrays what we're feeling, even when we try to mask it. Joy can erupt in an animated gesture, anxiety can manifest as restless fidgeting, and anger may grip a fist so tightly that the knuckles turn white. Hands, unlike words, rarely lie. They provide a direct, unfiltered window into our emotional state. In this chapter, we'll explore how hands express emotions, the subtle cues they reveal, and real-life stories where gestures spoke louder than words. Each emotion carries its own vocabulary of hand gestures. While these movements vary from person to person, certain patterns are universal and deeply tied to human psychology. Number 1. Anger, controlled or explosive. Anger is a high-energy emotion, and it shows in the hands through forceful, often rigid movements. Clenched fists, the universal sign of anger, often accompanied by tension in the arms. Abrupt movements, slamming a hand on a table, pointing aggressively, or jerking movements reflect frustration or an urge to assert control. Gripping objects, holding tightly to a pen, cup, or chair arm can signal suppressed anger. Number 2. Anxiety, restless and self-soothing. Anxiety often manifests as a need for the hands to find an outlet, resulting in repetitive or self-soothing gestures. Fidgeting, playing with jewelry, tapping fingers, or rubbing hands together are common signs of nervous energy. Self-touch, wrapping one hand around the other, touching the face, or wringing hands are attempts to comfort oneself. Hesitant movements, tentative or incomplete gestures suggest uncertainty and internal conflict. Number 3. Joy, open and expansive. Joy and excitement bring freedom and energy to hand movements. Open palms, a sign of openness and enthusiasm, often seen in moments of shared happiness. Sweeping gestures, larger, more dynamic movements that mirror the high energy of joy. Unconscious movements, clapping, rubbing hands together in anticipation, or throwing hands in the air are physical expressions of delight. Number 1. Tension, the body's emotional grip. Tension is often visible in the hands before it's apparent anywhere else. Stiffness, rigid, frozen hands often indicate stress or a desire to maintain control. White knuckles, a sign of extreme tension or fear, often accompanied by a clenched grip. Over-controlled gestures, movements that seem overly precise or restrained reflect an effort to suppress emotion. Number 2. Trembling, the body's emotional release. Trembling hands are a physiological response to intense emotions like fear, excitement, or exhaustion. Fear and anxiety. Adrenaline floods the body in moments of fear, causing involuntary shaking. Emotional release. Trembling can also occur after an emotional experience as the body processes and lets go of tension. 3. Fidgeting. Emotional overflow. Fidgeting is the hand's way of managing an excess of emotional energy. Anxiety fidgeting. Repeated tapping, rubbing, or touching serves as a coping mechanism. Excitement fidgeting. Quick, repetitive movements may reflect anticipation or eagerness. Discomfort fidgeting. Avoiding eye contact while fidgeting often signals unease or avoidance. Number 1. The nervous presenter. I once watched a young entrepreneur pitch her idea to a room full of investors. Her voice was steady, and her words were well rehearsed, but her hands told a different story. As she spoke, she repeatedly twisted the ring on her finger, her movements quick and anxious. The investors noticed. They later admitted they felt her idea was strong, but questioned her confidence. Her restless hands had unintentionally revealed her inner nerves, casting doubt on her readiness to handle the pressures of investment. Number 2. The anger beneath the smile. In a mediation session between two colleagues, one participant maintained a calm demeanor, even smiling occasionally. But his hands were a different story, clenched into fists under the table, with the knuckles showing white. His gestures revealed the suppressed frustration he wasn't voicing, providing crucial context for resolving the underlying conflict. Number 3. The joyful reunion. At an airport, I witnessed a heartwarming reunion between a mother and daughter. Before their words even reached each other, their hands had spoken, outstretched, trembling with anticipation, and finally clasped tightly in an embrace. The energy of their movements radiated pure, unfiltered joy. How to observe emotional hand gestures. Number 1. Focus on patterns. Is someone's hand gesture consistent throughout an interaction, or does it change in response to specific topics or moments? Patterns often provide clues to emotional triggers. Number 2. Pair with other cues. Gestures alone tell part of the story. Combine them with tone of voice, facial expressions, and body posture for a fuller understanding. Number 3. Observe transitions. Pay attention to what happens in moments of emotional shifts. Does the person's hand movement become more pronounced, or do they suddenly stop gesturing altogether? What do your hands reveal? Think about a recent moment when you experienced a strong emotion. What were your hands doing? Did they clench, fidget, or open wide? As you continue to observe the gestures of others, remember that hands rarely lie. They offer a direct line to the emotions we feel most deeply, whether we're conscious of them or not. In the next chapter, we'll delve into subconscious signals, the subtle, involuntary gestures that often reveal more than the speaker intends. But for now, take a moment to notice how your own hands move when you feel joy, anger, or nervousness. What might they be saying about you? Chapter 6. Subconscious Signals. Not all hand gestures are deliberate. Some of the most telling movements happen without a person even realizing it, subtle, instinctive actions that bypass conscious thought. These subconscious signals often reveal what's truly going on beneath the surface, offering a glimpse into someone's stress levels, focus, or intentions. Subconscious gestures are often small and fleeting, but they're deeply honest. While someone might carefully choose their words or control their larger movements, these involuntary gestures often slip through, providing clues that even the person themselves may not be aware of. Subconscious gestures are movements made in response to internal thoughts, emotions, or sensations. They're not planned or intentional, they simply happen like a reflex. Number 1. Common subconscious gestures. Touching the face, rubbing the chin, scratching the nose, or resting the hand on the cheek can indicate deep thought, uncertainty, or even discomfort. Covering the mouth. A hand moving toward the mouth during a conversation can signal hesitation or an attempt to hold back words. Adjusting clothing or accessories. Fiddling with a watch, straightening a tie, or adjusting sleeves often reveals nervous energy or a need for reassurance. Tapping fingers. A rhythmic tap or drumming of fingers can indicate impatience, anxiety, or anticipation. Number 2. Why these gestures matter. These movements are often made unconsciously, which means they're less filtered and more honest. While someone's verbal or deliberate nonverbal cues might be carefully crafted, their subconscious gestures tend to reveal their genuine state of mind. Objects often become extensions of our hands, and the way we interact with them can offer valuable insights into our inner state. Number 1. Handling objects. Gripping objects tightly, a sign of tension or a need for control. For example, gripping the arms of a chair during a difficult conversation may indicate discomfort or defensiveness. Playing with small objects. Twirling a pen, flipping a coin, or rolling a ring often reveals nervousness or the need to self-soothe. Holding objects steadily indicates calmness, focus, or confidence. Number 2. Hand rubbing. Rubbing the hands together is a self-soothing gesture, often seen during moments of stress or anticipation. Fast, vigorous rubbing may signal excitement or eagerness, as if someone is ready to dive in. Slow, gentle rubbing suggests nervousness or an attempt to calm oneself. 3. Repetitive motions. Repetitive gestures, such as tapping, bouncing a leg, or continuously touching the same object, often reflect heightened emotional states. Repetition and anxiety. The body uses repetitive movements to release excess nervous energy. Repetition and focus. In some cases, repetitive motions may indicate intense concentration, as if the gesture helps the person stay in the zone. Number 1. Stress and subconscious gestures. Stress often triggers small, involuntary movements as the body seeks ways to manage tension. Clenched fists or tightened hands, a physical manifestation of internal stress or frustration. Excessive object handling suggests the need for a distraction or outlet for nervous energy. Number 2. Focus and engagement. Subconscious gestures also reveal whether someone is fully engaged or distracted. Gestures that mirror speech. When someone's hand movements align with their words, it's a sign of active engagement and clarity of thought. Gestures that drift or stop. Sudden pauses in gesturing may indicate a loss of focus or mental disengagement. Number 3. Intent and inner conflict. Subconscious gestures can signal when someone's intentions don't align with their words. Contradictory movements. A person agreeing verbally while rubbing their neck or fiddling with an object may suggest hesitation or doubt. Self-touching gestures, often linked to discomfort or internal conflict, such as when someone is unsure about their own statements. Number 1. The hesitant speaker. During a presentation, a young professional repeatedly adjusted her glasses, even though they didn't need straightening. Her movements, paired with her overly rehearsed tone, revealed her underlying nerves. The audience sensed her hesitation, despite her polished delivery. Number 2. The negotiator's hidden doubts. In a business negotiation, one party maintained a confident posture but continuously rolled a pen back and forth between their fingers. While their words expressed certainty, the repetitive motion revealed their underlying anxiety about the deal's terms. Number 3. The reassuring parent. At a school event, a father rubbed his child's shoulder while engaging in polite small talk with other parents. His gesture, though subtle, communicated a protective and reassuring presence, even though the conversation was lighthearted. Number 1. Pay attention to patterns. Subconscious gestures often repeat. If someone keeps touching their face or fiddling with their hands during a specific topic, it's a clue to their emotional state. Number 2. Consider timing. Notice when a gesture occurs. Does it happen during a question, a moment of tension, or a transition in the conversation? Timing can reveal what triggered the movement. Number 3. Cross-reference with other cues. Subconscious signals gain clarity when paired with other body language or verbal cues. For example, someone tapping their fingers while smiling might indicate excitement, but the same gesture with a furrowed brow suggests frustration. Subconscious gestures are like whispers. They're easy to overlook, but incredibly revealing once you learn to notice them. As you observe others, focus on the small, instinctive movements that happen without thought. Ask yourself, what are my hands doing when I feel nervous or focused? Have I noticed patterns in the subconscious gestures of those around me? In the next chapter, we'll explore how these subconscious signals interact with broader patterns of communication, offering a deeper understanding of nonverbal intent. For now, take a moment to observe the gestures happening around you. They might tell you more than words ever could. Chapter 7. Cultural Layers of Gestures. Hand gestures can feel universal at times. After all, a wave or a handshake seems to transcend language. Yet, beneath this apparent simplicity lies a rich tapestry of cultural diversity. A gesture that conveys warmth in one culture might be seen as rude or even hostile in another. Understanding these cultural layers is essential for interpreting hand language accurately and respectfully, especially in an increasingly interconnected world. This chapter explores the balance between universal and culturally specific gestures, real-life cases of cultural misunderstandings, and strategies for navigating these complexities with sensitivity. Universal gestures. Certain hand gestures are universally recognized, often rooted in shared human experiences. Open palms, associated with honesty and openness across most cultures, likely originating as a way to show one wasn't holding a weapon. Pointing, used universally to direct attention, though its social acceptability varies. Fist clenching, often a sign of anger or frustration, a primal expression tied to fight or flight responses. These gestures are understood almost instinctively, regardless of language or geography, because they are hardwired into human behavior. Culturally specific gestures. While some gestures are universal, others carry vastly different meanings depending on cultural context. Thumbs up, a sign of approval in Western cultures, but considered offensive in some Middle Eastern and South American countries. The OK gesture, circle formed with thumb and forefinger positive in the US, but in Brazil or Turkey, it can carry an offensive or derogatory meaning. Nodding and shaking the head. While nodding generally means agreement, in countries like Bulgaria or Greece, it can mean the opposite. These culturally specific meanings highlight the importance of understanding context when interpreting hand gestures. Number 1. The diplomatic misstep. A Western diplomat visiting the Middle East gave a casual thumbs-up gesture during a public event, intending to signal approval. Unbeknownst to them, the gesture was interpreted as offensive by the local audience, creating an unintended stir. Number 2. The business deal that went awry. In a negotiation between American and Japanese executives, the Americans interpreted a firm handshake and direct pointing as signs of confidence, while the Japanese team found these gestures overly aggressive and disrespectful. Misunderstandings about hand language contributed to a strained atmosphere, delaying the agreement. Number 3. The traveler's blunder. A tourist visiting Brazil used the OK gesture to signal their satisfaction with a meal, only to be met with awkward silence from the staff. What they intended as a compliment was perceived as an insult. These cases underscore the need for cultural awareness in interpreting gestures. Without this understanding, even well-meaning actions can lead to miscommunication or offense. Number 1. Educate yourself on cultural norms. Before interacting with people from a different cultural background, take the time to research their nonverbal communication norms. Focus on common gestures. Learn which gestures are acceptable or taboo. Handshakes and greetings. Understand the appropriate way to greet someone, whether through a handshake, bow, or other gesture. Cultural attitudes toward touch. In some cultures, physical touch is reserved for close relationships, while in others, it's a common form of connection. Number 2. Observe before you act. When in doubt, observe how others use gestures before engaging. Pay attention to how they greet, point, or express emotions through their hands. This can provide valuable context for your own interactions. Number 3. Adopt a curious and open attitude. Approach cultural differences with curiosity rather than judgment. If you inadvertently make a gesture that's inappropriate in a specific culture, acknowledge the mistake and express your intention to learn. Number 4. Avoid assumptions. Even within a single culture, individual variations exist. Don't assume that everyone from a particular culture will interpret gestures in the same way. Number 5. Focus on building connection. At its core, hand language is about communication and connection. When navigating cultural differences, prioritize empathy and mutual understanding. This can often bridge gaps that gestures alone cannot. Think about your own use of hand gestures. How might they be perceived differently in another culture? Have you ever noticed gestures from others that seemed unfamiliar or ambiguous? Understanding the cultural layers of hand language is not about memorizing a list of do's and don'ts. It's about fostering respect and connection. In the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the interaction between hands and words, exploring how gestures can amplify, contradict, or even override spoken language. But for now, consider how your hands communicate across cultural boundaries and how understanding these layers might deepen your interactions. Chapter 8. The Dance Between Hands and Words. Hand gestures and spoken language form a powerful duo. While words convey explicit meaning, Gestures often reveal the layers underneath: emotions, intentions, and unspoken truths. In this intricate dance, gestures can either amplify the message, aligning seamlessly with words, or contradict it, exposing hidden conflicts or insincerity. Understanding this dynamic interplay between hands and words is essential for interpreting nonverbal communication accurately and navigating conversations with greater insight. Gestures as amplifiers. When gestures align with speech, they enhance understanding and make the message more impactful. Emphasis. A speaker using broad, sweeping gestures while making an impassioned point adds intensity and clarity to their words. Illustration. Gestures that mimic the content of the message, such as showing the size of an object with your hands, make abstract ideas tangible. Engagement. Dynamic hand movements draw the audience's attention and help them stay connected to the conversation. Gestures as contradictions. When gestures and words are misaligned, they create tension and ambiguity, often signaling underlying conflict. Unintended signals. A person saying, "I'm fine," while wringing their hands sends a mixed message, hinting at discomfort or distress. Hesitation. Subtle gestures like hand-to-face touches or fidgeting while making a confident statement can undermine credibility. Contradictory movements. Closed, defensive gestures like crossed arms while expressing openness suggest insincerity or internal conflict. These contradictions are often more revealing than the words themselves, as they hint at what the person might be trying to hide or what they're struggling to articulate. Mixed signals occur when spoken words and nonverbal cues diverge, creating confusion or revealing hidden emotions. Recognizing these inconsistencies requires careful observation and a willingness to look beyond surface-level communication. Common mixed signals. Positive words, negative gestures. Someone says they're excited about an opportunity while clenching their fists or avoiding eye contact. Confident words, nervous gestures. A job candidate speaks confidently but taps their fingers or adjusts their clothing repeatedly, suggesting underlying anxiety. Agreeable words, defensive gestures. A nod accompanied by folded arms might signal reluctant agreement rather than genuine enthusiasm. Interpreting mixed signals. To understand mixed signals, consider context. What's the situation? Is the person under pressure, trying to please others, or experiencing conflict? Timing. When does the contradictory gesture occur? Does it align with specific words or topics? Other cues. Look at facial expressions, tone of voice, and posture for a fuller picture. Mixed signals don't always indicate dishonesty. They often reflect internal conflict or a struggle to balance emotions and expectations. Number 1. The apology that fell flat. During a televised apology, a public figure spoke heartfelt words of regret, but his hands remained clenched at his sides, and his fingers occasionally pointed as he spoke. Viewers noted the contrast between his remorseful words and his defensive gestures, leading many to question his sincerity. Number 2. The negotiation reveal. In a high-stakes business negotiation, one party verbally agreed to a compromise but continually tapped their pen against the table while speaking. This subtle gesture revealed their frustration and reluctance, prompting the other side to press further, ultimately securing a better deal. Number 3. The empowering speech. A motivational speaker captured their audience's attention not just with their words, but with their dynamic hand gestures. When discussing overcoming obstacles, they mimed pushing barriers aside, and when describing growth, their hands reached upward. These gestures brought their message to life, leaving a lasting impact. How to master the dance between hands and words. Number 1. Pay attention to alignment. Observe whether someone's gestures support or contradict their words. Consistency typically signals sincerity, while misalignment can indicate conflict or discomfort. Number 2. Focus on key moments. Gestures often become most revealing during moments of emotional intensity, hesitation, or transition in the conversation. Number 3. Refine your own gestures. To ensure your gestures align with your message, practice speaking in front of a mirror to observe your natural movements. Use deliberate, purposeful gestures that emphasize your words. Avoid fidgeting or repetitive motions that might distract from your message. The interplay between hands and words is a dance of meaning, emotion, and intention. As you engage in conversations, ask yourself, are the gestures I see amplifying or contradicting the spoken message? How do my own gestures align with what I'm saying? Understanding this dynamic opens the door to deeper communication, helping you interpret others more effectively and present yourself with greater clarity. In the next chapter, we'll explore how hand gestures can reveal deception and defense, diving into the subtle signals that betray hidden truths. But for now, take note of the hands around you and how they move in rhythm, or discord, with the words they accompany. Chapter 9. Deception and Defense. The hands often betray us when we're trying to defend ourselves or conceal the truth. While words can be carefully chosen and rehearsed, hand gestures tend to operate on a subconscious level, revealing tension, discomfort, or dishonesty. This chapter dives into the defensive hand gestures that arise when we feel vulnerable, the subtle signals that hint at deception, and practical ways to use this knowledge to discern truth and foster trust. When we feel threatened, uncertain, or exposed, our hands often react defensively to shield us, protect our space, or provide a sense of control. Number 1. Covering gestures. Hand-to-face touching, covering the mouth, rubbing the nose, or shielding the eyes are common gestures of discomfort. These often occur when someone feels vulnerable or exposed. Crossing hands over the body. Folding arms across the chest or holding one hand on the opposite arm creates a barrier, signaling defensiveness or unease. Hiding behind objects. Placing hands behind a bag, clasping them under the table, or holding a coffee cup tightly are ways people shield themselves physically. Number 2. Clenching and tension. Clenched fists. A universal sign of frustration or suppressed anger, often accompanied by tight shoulders or a stiff posture. Tightly interlaced fingers. Indicates a strong need for control or an effort to suppress anxiety. Gripping objects. Holding pens, phones, or other items with excessive force signals stress or nervous energy. Number 3. Retreating movements. Pulling hands back. A quick retraction of the hands, especially during a handshake or while gesturing, can indicate discomfort or a desire to disengage. Keeping hands close to the body. Minimizing movements or hiding hands entirely suggests a defensive or withdrawn state. Deception often reveals itself through the hands, even when the person believes they're in control of their body language. Subtle gestures can hint at internal conflict, hesitation, or the effort required to sustain a lie. Number 1. Hesitations in movement. Delayed gestures. When gestures lag behind speech, it suggests the person is thinking carefully about what they're saying, potentially fabricating or withholding information. Pauses in natural flow. Abrupt stops in gesturing or overly calculated movements can signal discomfort or uncertainty. Number 2. Hand hiding. Hands in pockets. Keeping hands out of view often suggests an attempt to conceal nervousness or tension. Hands behind the back. While this can sometimes appear authoritative, it can also indicate an effort to hide fidgeting or other signs of discomfort. Under the table. Tucking hands out of sight, especially during a tense conversation, signals reluctance or an attempt to avoid scrutiny. Number 3. Inconsistencies with speech. Gestures that don't align. For example, someone saying, "I'm confident," while their hands fidget or move erratically creates a mismatch that suggests doubt. Overcompensating gestures. Exaggerated movements or overly rehearsed gestures can feel unnatural, hinting at a lack of authenticity. Number 1. Observe baseline behavior. Before interpreting defensive or deceptive gestures, establish what's normal for the person. Some people naturally fidget or gesture minimally. Changes from their baseline are more telling than isolated gestures. Number 2. Look for clusters. A single gesture may not mean much, but when multiple defensive or deceptive cues occur together, they paint a clearer picture. For example, a person hides their hands, avoids eye contact, and fidgets simultaneously. They pause frequently while speaking and make inconsistent gestures. Clusters of behavior provide stronger evidence than one isolated action. Number 3. Context matters. Always consider the situation. Defensive gestures might not mean deception. They could indicate nervousness, confusion, or simply discomfort with the environment. Number 4. Respond empathetically. If you notice defensive or deceptive gestures, use the opportunity to build trust rather than confront. For example, acknowledge their discomfort indirectly. "I sense this might be a tricky topic. Feel free to share whatever you're comfortable with." Ask open-ended questions to encourage honesty. "Can you tell me more about how you're feeling about this decision?" Number 5. Use your own gestures to foster trust. Lead by example with open, relaxed hand movements to create a safe and inviting atmosphere. Use open palms to signal honesty and transparency. Avoid crossing your arms or fidgeting, as these can unintentionally mirror defensiveness. Stories of deception and defense in action. Number 1. The shy job candidate. A young professional at a job interview kept his hands tightly clasped on his lap, barely moving them as he spoke. While his answers were thoughtful, his defensive posture and lack of expressive gestures made him seem closed off, unintentionally weakening his impression. Number 2. The negotiator's tell. During a high-stakes negotiation, one party repeatedly hid their hands under the table while discussing financial risks. This small, consistent action made the opposing side suspect they were withholding key details, and they were right. Number 3. The confession that wasn't. In a mediation session, a participant expressed remorse for their actions but rubbed their neck and avoided direct gestures toward the other party. The lack of congruence between their words and body language revealed that their apology wasn't entirely sincere. The hands reveal what the voice might try to hide. By paying attention to defensive and deceptive gestures, you gain a deeper understanding of what's really happening beneath the surface. As you observe others, ask yourself, what do their gestures reveal about their emotional state? Do their words and movements align, or are there inconsistencies? How can I create an environment that fosters openness and trust? In the next chapter, we'll transition to the practical application of this knowledge, exploring how to refine your own gestures and master hand language to build deeper connections and communicate with impact. For now, practice watching the hands around you. They might be saying more than you think. Chapter 10. Building your own gesture awareness. Understanding the language of hands begins with yourself. The way you move your hands during a conversation, presentation, or even a moment of stillness communicates volumes about your confidence, emotions, and intentions. This chapter focuses on cultivating self-awareness about your hand gestures, identifying habits that might undermine your communication, and practicing exercises to develop intentional, confident movements. Mastering your own gestures is a gateway to clearer, more impactful communication. Self-awareness is the foundation of effective communication. Often, we move our hands without realizing it, performing gestures out of habit rather than intention. These unconscious movements can send mixed signals, undermine our message, or even distract our audience. Number 1. Observing your gestures in real time. Notice patterns. Pay attention to your hands during conversations. Do they fidget, cross, or remain still? Identify triggers. Observe how your gestures change in different situations, when you're nervous, excited, or calm. Ask for feedback. Trusted friends or colleagues can provide valuable insights into how your gestures come across. Number 2. The power of reflection. Review recordings. Watching videos of yourself during presentations or meetings can reveal habits you might not notice in the moment. Keep a gesture journal. Jot down observations about your hand movements after important interactions. This practice helps you track progress and spot recurring patterns. Certain hand habits, though often subconscious, can unintentionally detract from your message. Recognizing and addressing these gestures is key to projecting confidence and clarity. Number 1. Common gestures to watch for. Fidgeting. Twirling a pen, tapping fingers, or repeatedly adjusting clothing can signal nervousness or lack of focus. Crossing arms or hiding hands. These defensive gestures can make you seem closed off or unapproachable. Overuse of repetitive gestures. Constantly pointing, waving, or overemphasizing every point can overwhelm your audience. Number 2. Misaligned gestures. Gestures that don't match words. Saying, "I'm excited," while keeping your hands in your pockets sends a conflicting message. Overly dramatic movements. Large, exaggerated gestures can distract from your words or come across as insincere. Number 3. Situational missteps. Cultural misunderstandings. Certain gestures may have unintended meanings in different cultural contexts. Inappropriate touching. Gestures like patting someone's arm may be perceived as invasive in professional or formal settings. Improving your hand language requires practice and mindfulness. These exercises are designed to help you develop gestures that align with your message and enhance your presence. Number 1. Mirror practice. What to do? Stand in front of a mirror and practice speaking on a familiar topic. Observe how your hands move naturally. What to look for? Are your gestures purposeful and fluid? Do they match the tone of your words? How it helps. This exercise builds awareness of your natural movements and helps refine them. Number 2. The The still hands exercise. What to do? Practice delivering a short speech or explanation with your hands resting at your sides or on a table. What to observe? Notice how it feels to keep your hands still and how it impacts your focus and delivery. How it helps. This exercise trains you to eliminate unnecessary movements and use gestures intentionally. Number 3. Emphasizing key points. What to do? Choose 3 main points you want to convey and plan specific gestures to highlight them. For example, use an open palm to invite agreement. Point decisively to emphasize a key idea. Spread your hands outward to signal inclusion. How it helps. This exercise helps you pair gestures with specific parts of your message, making them more impactful. Number 4. Gesture freezing. What to do? While having a conversation or giving a presentation, pause mid-gesture and hold it for a moment. What to observe? How does this affect your rhythm and audience engagement? How it helps. This technique slows you down, ensuring your gestures are deliberate and aligned with your words. Number 5. Record and review. What to do? Record yourself during everyday interactions, presentations, or practice sessions. Watch the playback to evaluate your hand movements. What to look for? Are your gestures smooth and aligned with your message? Do you see any distracting habits? How it helps. Reviewing recordings offers valuable insights and helps track progress over time. Mastering your hand language isn't about becoming overly polished or rehearsed. It's about aligning your gestures with your intentions. By becoming aware of your habits, addressing unhelpful patterns, and practicing intentional movements, you can communicate with greater clarity, confidence, and authenticity. Ask yourself, what do my hand gestures currently say about me? How can I refine my movements to better support my message? In the next chapter, we'll take these principles further, exploring advanced observation techniques to read the gestures of others in real time. For now, focus on your own hands. What are they doing, and what story are they telling? Chapter 11. Advanced Observation Skills. Mastering the language of hands requires more than understanding general meanings or noticing obvious gestures. It demands a trained eye to pick up on subtle movements, identify patterns, and interpret shifts in behavior in real time. In this chapter, we delve into the techniques and practices that will help you refine your observation skills, enabling you to read hands with precision and insight. The most revealing hand movements are often the smallest, quick adjustments, fleeting touches, or slight shifts in position. Training your eye to notice these subtleties requires focus, patience, and deliberate practice. Number 1. Sharpening your focus. Start with a narrow field. Rather than observing an entire person's body language, focus exclusively on their hands during a conversation. Notice how they move, rest, or interact with objects. Practice with everyday interactions. Observe friends, colleagues, or strangers in casual settings. Pay attention to hand movements when they're relaxed versus when they're under stress or excitement. Use video playback. Record conversations, interviews, or public speeches and replay them with a specific focus on the hands. This allows you to analyze gestures without the distraction of other cues. Number 2. Expanding your awareness. Peripheral observation. Train yourself to notice hand gestures even when you're focusing on someone's face or listening to their words. This skill is critical for real-time interpretation. Practice still observation. Watch interactions in environments where you're not actively participating, such as in a cafe or on public transport. Look for patterns in hand behavior across different situations. Number 3. Becoming attuned to subtlety. Micro-movements. Look for tiny adjustments, such as a brief clench of fingers, a subtle rub of the thumb, or a fleeting tap. These often reveal emotional undercurrents. Transitions between gestures. Notice how hands move between larger gestures. Do they pause, hesitate, or flow smoothly? These transitions can offer valuable clues about someone's state of mind. Gestures rarely happen in isolation. They often form patterns that, when observed, reveal consistent behaviors or shifts in emotional states. Number 1. Identifying patterns. Recurring movements. Watch for gestures someone repeats during a conversation or across different interactions. These may indicate habitual responses or deeply ingrained feelings. Gesture clusters. A single gesture might mean little on its own, but when paired with other cues, it can form a cluster that provides context. For example, rubbing hands, avoiding eye contact, and shifting posture may signal anxiety. Pointing while leaning forward and speaking quickly may indicate assertiveness or urgency. Number 2. Detecting shifts in behavior. Changes in hand behavior often signal a shift in emotions or intentions. Sudden stillness. A person who stops gesturing abruptly may be processing a new thought, feeling overwhelmed, or withholding something. Increased movement. An increase in fidgeting, tapping, or rapid gestures can suggest heightened emotion, whether excitement, anxiety, or frustration. Switching gestures. A change from open, relaxed movements to defensive or closed gestures may indicate a shift in confidence or mood. Number 3. Recognizing personal baselines. Everyone has unique habits. A gesture that signals anxiety in one person might be neutral in another. Spend time observing an individual's baseline behavior to recognize when their gestures deviate from the norm. Baseline in context. Consider how a person's gestures change in different settings, e.g., a relaxed social gathering versus a formal meeting. Interpreting gestures in real time is both an art and a science. It requires the ability to observe, contextualize, and draw insights while maintaining engagement in the moment. Number 1. Steps for real-time observation. Start with the hands. Where are the hands positioned? Are they still, active, or interacting with objects? Watch for key moments. Pay attention to gestures during emotionally charged or pivotal parts of the conversation, such as when someone is asked a challenging question or sharing something personal. Look for clusters. Combine hand gestures with other nonverbal cues, facial expressions, posture, tone of voice, to form a clearer picture. Number 2. Contextualizing the gestures. Consider the setting. A gesture in a casual conversation might mean something different in a high-pressure environment. Factor in the relationship. The dynamics between people influence how gestures are expressed and interpreted. Pay attention to timing. Note when gestures occur in relation to speech or specific topics. Are they reactive, anticipatory, or coincidental? Number 3. Balancing observation with engagement. Stay present. Avoid becoming so focused on interpreting gestures that you lose the flow of the conversation. Trust your intuition to guide your observations. Ask clarifying questions. If a gesture seems significant but ambiguous, use open-ended questions to invite clarity. For example, how do you feel about this decision? Refining your observation skills transforms how you engage with others. Subtle gestures, once overlooked, become windows into deeper understanding. Ask yourself, what small movements or patterns am I noticing in others? How can I balance detailed observation with active participation in conversations? In the next chapter, we'll explore how to use your understanding of hand language to foster connection, build trust, and strengthen relationships. For now, focus on noticing the subtle shifts and patterns in hand behavior around you. Every small movement tells a story. Are you ready to listen? Chapter 12. Using hand language to connect. Hand gestures are more than tools for expression. They're bridges to connection. The way you move your hands can build trust, diffuse tension, and create rapport in ways that words alone cannot. This chapter explores how hand language can deepen connections in both personal and professional settings, offering practical examples and strategies to harness this power intentionally. Trust and rapport are the foundation of meaningful connections, and gestures play a vital role in establishing both. When used intentionally, hand movements can make you appear more approachable, genuine, and confident. Number 1. Gestures that build trust. Open palms. Exposing your palms signals honesty and transparency. It subconsciously reassures others that you're not hiding anything, physically or emotionally. Gentle hand movements, slow, deliberate gestures convey calmness and stability, making others feel at ease. Visible hands. Keeping your hands visible during interactions signals openness. Hiding your hands, such as in pockets or behind your back, can create mistrust. Number 2. Gestures that foster rapport. Mirroring. Subtly reflecting the gestures of the person you're interacting with creates a sense of harmony and understanding. For example, if someone rests their hand on the table, gently mirroring the posture can build subconscious rapport. Inviting gestures. Gestures like extending your hand outward or using an open arm movement signal inclusion and invite collaboration. Leaning with hands. Resting your hands on the table and leaning slightly forward shows engagement and active listening. Number 3. The science of gesture and trust. Studies have shown that people are more likely to trust individuals who use open, fluid hand gestures. These movements suggest confidence and authenticity, while rigid or abrupt gestures can create a sense of distance or unease. Conflict, tension, or awkwardness can make it challenging to connect. Hand gestures can act as powerful tools for bridging these gaps, helping to create a more relaxed and open atmosphere. Number 1. Diffusing tension. Soft, calming movements. Gentle gestures, such as a slow wave of the hand or a light touch on the table, can help diffuse escalating emotions. Neutral, open palms. Using open hands at waist level communicates non-aggression and encourages dialogue. Hands at rest. Placing your hands calmly in view, rather than fidgeting or crossing your arms, signals patience and receptivity. Number 2. Bridging awkwardness. Acknowledging space. When someone seems withdrawn, gestures that invite rather than impose, like slowly extending a hand or gesturing lightly, can create a sense of safety. Warm, inclusive gestures. Movements like a small wave or a nod paired with open hand gestures encourage others to feel welcomed and included. Number 3. Strengthening emotional connection. Gestures that convey empathy. Placing a hand on your chest while expressing understanding can show sincerity and emotional resonance. Offering physical reassurance. In appropriate settings, a light touch on the shoulder or arm can convey support and solidarity. Nonverbal listening. Nodding while keeping your hands relaxed or using small gestures to encourage the speaker can enhance emotional connection. Number 1. In social interactions. The welcoming host. At a social gathering, you use open arm gestures to greet guests, lightly touch their arm during introductions, and gesture toward food or seating areas with open palms. These movements make others feel included and comfortable. The supportive friend. A friend shares a difficult experience, and as they speak, you keep your hands calm and visible, occasionally placing a hand on your chest or using gentle, open movements to show empathy and attention. Number 2. In professional settings. The confident leader. During a team meeting, you use controlled, purposeful gestures to emphasize your points, maintaining open palms and steady hand movements to exude authority while inviting collaboration. The skilled negotiator. While discussing terms, you use small, deliberate gestures to show thoughtfulness, pausing with your hands resting lightly on the table to signal patience and openness. Number 3. In high-tension scenarios. The diplomatic mediator. In a heated discussion, you diffuse tension by keeping your palms visible and moving slowly to signal calm. When emotions run high, you avoid pointing or abrupt movements, instead using gentle, open gestures to guide the conversation back to neutral ground. The resolving partner. During a conflict with a colleague or loved one, you use gestures that align with vulnerability, such as placing a hand over your heart or lightly extending your hand as you speak, creating space for understanding and reconciliation. Reflection. Connecting through the language of hands. Gestures are a powerful means of connection, capable of building trust, easing tension, and deepening relationships. As you engage with others, ask yourself, how can I use my hands to create a sense of openness and trust? Am I aware of how my gestures affect the emotional tone of the interaction? In the next chapter, we'll explore how presence and intentional gestures can become daily habits, shaping the way you connect with others and express yourself in every aspect of life. For now, begin noticing how your hand movements can foster connection, one gesture at a time. The language that connects us. The journey through the language of hands is more than an exploration of gestures. It's a path to understanding ourselves and others more deeply. Our hands, so often overlooked, are powerful storytellers, revealing what lies beneath the surface of words and actions. They express our fears, hopes, and truths in ways that transcend spoken language. As we reflect on what we've uncovered, it becomes clear. Understanding hand language isn't just a skill, it's a doorway to empathy, connection, and authenticity. Throughout this journey, we've seen how hands quietly narrate the stories we carry. The nervous energy of a fidgeting pen that whispers uncertainty. The open palm of trust extended in a handshake. The gentle hand on a shoulder that says, "I'm here for you." Every gesture has the potential to bridge the gap between people, building trust, diffusing tension, and creating moments of profound connection. When we learn to listen to these silent stories, we unlock a new dimension of understanding, one that words alone cannot provide. The ability to read gestures is more than a tool for interpretation. It's a practice in empathy. By observing hands, you begin to see the unspoken struggles and emotions of others. A quick clench of a fist might reveal frustration that's never verbalized. A hesitant touch to the face could hint at insecurity during a critical moment. A firm, steady hand might convey confidence, even in silence. When you learn to see beyond the surface, you open yourself to deeper, more meaningful interactions. This is the gift of understanding the language of hands, the ability to truly see people, not just their words, but their feelings, intentions, and unspoken truths. The knowledge you've gained isn't meant to remain theoretical. It's meant to transform the way you connect with the world. Engage with authenticity. Use your own hand gestures intentionally, ensuring they align with your words and emotions. Let your movements reflect honesty, openness, and connection. Observe with empathy. Approach the hand gestures of others not as puzzles to solve, but as windows into their experiences. Watch without judgment, and let what you see deepen your understanding of their inner world. Build bridges with purpose. Whether in professional settings, personal relationships, or fleeting encounters, let your hands become tools for building trust and fostering connection. Imagine a world where we all took the time to truly observe and connect, where every handshake, wave, or simple touch carried with it the intention to understand and uplift. The language of hands can help create that world, one gesture at a time. This book is not an end, it's a beginning. Your hands, and the hands of those around you, have stories yet to tell. Pay attention to them, learn from them, and let them guide you toward a life of greater empathy, authenticity, and connection. As you close these pages, take a moment to observe your own hands. Notice their stillness, their tension, or their movement. Reflect on what they might be saying about you right now. And as you move forward, let them become storytellers of your truest self, open, honest, and deeply connected to the world around you. Because in the end, the language of hands is not just about communication, it's about connection. And connection is what makes us human. Case studies and exercises. The journey of understanding hand language is both practical and transformative. To bring these concepts to life, this section offers real-world case studies where gestures played a pivotal role in changing outcomes. Additionally, you'll find exercises to hone your skills and integrate hand language into your everyday life. Case studies. 1. A business deal saved by recognizing deceptive gestures. During a high-stakes negotiation, one party appeared fully engaged and agreeable, nodding along and speaking confidently. But their hands betrayed them. Under the table, they were gripping their chair tightly and occasionally pulling their hands back to clasp nervously. Recognizing these signals of discomfort, the other party adjusted their approach, asking clarifying questions and revisiting specific terms. The move prompted a candid discussion about concerns that hadn't been openly addressed, ultimately saving the deal. Defensive and deceptive gestures often hint at unspoken hesitations. Spotting these cues and addressing them tactfully can open the door to deeper trust and understanding. 2. A romantic relationship strengthened through gesture awareness. A couple struggling with communication sought to rebuild their connection. One partner noticed the other frequently crossed their arms or turned their hands inward during discussions about difficult topics. Instead of reacting defensively, they gently asked, "Are you feeling unheard or uncomfortable?" This question, paired with open, non-threatening gestures of their own, encouraged the other partner to share more honestly. Over time, both began to notice and address subtle hand movements, creating a deeper sense of safety and trust in their relationship. Lesson: awareness of gestures can reveal hidden emotions and foster more empathetic, constructive conversations. 3. A tense negotiation diffused by observing defensive hand movements. In a boardroom filled with tension, a negotiator noticed one participant repeatedly rubbing their hands together and clutching their pen tightly whenever a specific issue was discussed. Rather than ignoring these signals, the negotiator paused to address the concern. "It seems like this point might be causing some discomfort. Let's explore that further." By creating space for open dialogue, the negotiator diffused the tension, helping the group reach a mutually satisfying agreement. Lesson: defensive gestures often point to unresolved conflict or discomfort. Acknowledging and addressing these signals can transform tense situations into productive discussions. Exercises. 1. Observing hands in conversations, patterns and interpretations. What to do? During your next conversation, focus specifically on the other person's hands. Observe their movements, noting patterns such as fidgeting, clenching, or open gestures. Questions to reflect on. Do their gestures align with their words and tone? Are there any shifts in hand behavior at key moments? What might these gestures reveal about their emotional state? Develop your ability to notice subtle, recurring patterns in hand movements and connect them to emotional or contextual cues. 2. Practicing intentional gestures for confidence and connection. What to do? Choose a topic you're passionate about and practice discussing it in front of a mirror. Focus on pairing your words with purposeful hand gestures. Use open palms to convey honesty. Employ upward gestures to show enthusiasm. Pause your hands occasionally to avoid overgesturing. Questions to reflect on. Do your gestures feel natural and aligned with your words? Are you avoiding unnecessary fidgeting or repetitive movements? Cultivate gestures that enhance your message and make you appear more confident and approachable. 3. Decoding microgestures in real-world settings. What to do? Observe interactions in public places, e.g. a cafe, meeting, or family gathering. Focus on small, subtle hand movements such as tapping fingers, rubbing objects, or adjusting clothing. Questions to reflect on. What emotions or intentions might these microgestures reveal? How do these gestures change as the conversation progresses? Do you notice clusters of behavior that indicate heightened emotions? Train your eye to pick up on microgestures and interpret their meaning within context. Reflection. Integrating the language of hands. These case studies and exercises are designed to deepen your understanding of hand language and empower you to apply these skills in meaningful ways. By observing, practicing, and refining your ability to interpret and use gestures, you unlock a powerful tool for connection and insight. Ask yourself, what have I learned about my own gestures and those of others? How can I use this knowledge to improve my personal and professional relationships? The journey doesn't end here. Continue to explore the silent language of hands, knowing that every gesture is an opportunity to connect, understand, and grow. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the language of hands, understanding gestures and hidden meanings. I hope this journey has inspired you to see the silent language of gestures in a whole new light, whether in your relationships, your work, or your everyday life. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's more than just a simple act. It's your way of supporting thoughtful content and helping us grow this community of seekers and learners. Your engagement ensures that we can continue bringing you valuable insights and meaningful discussions. Let's spread the knowledge and keep exploring the subtle, profound ways we connect with one another. Thank you for your time, your presence, and your support. Until next time, keep observing, keep connecting, and keep growing. Subscribe and be part of the mindful journey.